Hi everyone, I'm Maggie McGrath with Forbes Breaking News. Storm system Helene is barreling towards the Florida Gulf Coast, and earlier today it was named a hurricane, Category 1. Here to explain what this means and where the storm is heading is Alex Da Silva. He is AccuWeather's lead hurricane expert. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, so tell us where we are right now with this storm. Where exactly is Helene and what havoc is it wreaking?
Yeah, well, Helene is located just to the east of Cancun right now, between the Yucatan Peninsula and western Cuba. The storm underwent some rapid intensification here over the last 24 hours, really intensifying into a hurricane right now. Right now, though, it's dealing with a little bit of land interaction between the Yucatan Peninsula and western Cuba. So the intensification process has been halted a little bit, just temporarily, I think. I think, though, when the storm really gets out into the eastern Gulf of Mexico here later on this afternoon and overnight, the intensification process will really resume, as it really won't have that land to kind of slow it down.
So it started as a tropical storm. It is Category 1, and you said the land that it is hitting between Cancun and Cuba is slowing it down. Could it go to Category 2 or Category 3 as it moves across the Gulf?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we actually do forecast it to become a Category 2 hurricane later on this evening or overnight as it begins to pull away from those land masses. So once it gets out over the open ocean or open waters of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, I think it will really start to intensify. And by tomorrow morning, we could be having a Category 3 hurricane on our hands. Still forecasting for it to become a Category 3 hurricane for landfall, strong Category 3 Thursday evening, moving into the Big Bend area of Florida.
Strong Category 3. So what does this mean in terms of real effects, in terms of the wind speed and the rainfall? What are we expecting to see on the ground in the United States? And I guess let's start with Florida.
Yeah, we'll walk you guys through the different impacts. We'll start with the rain. Yeah. Helene is going to be a very large system, so the impacts are going to be felt well away from the center of circulation and at times hundreds of miles away from the center of circulation. So again, if the storm is moving, I'm going to forecast to make landfall right around here and then take a track generally like this. You can see how those really big rainfall totals can really expand away from the center of circulation. The entirety of the peninsula of Florida will likely see at least 2 to 4 inches of rain, with higher totals near where it makes landfall. Then we have to look further north towards the southern Appalachians. Almost the entire state of Georgia could see 8 to 12 inches of rain. That includes the Atlanta metro area, and then up into the higher elevations of western North Carolina, western South Carolina, and extreme northern Georgia. This is the area where I am really concerned about rainfall amounts potentially exceeding a foot of rain, and that's higher terrain up there. And so we could potentially be dealing with some mudslides and some road closures up in that area there. And again, that is pretty far away from where the center of circulation is going to be making landfall. If we take a look at the wind from the storm is going to be interacting with a dip in the jet stream, moving in just like this. And so we're really going to see those winds get transported pretty far to the north, more north than you would see in a typical tropical system. Of course, you're going to have your highest winds right there, right where the center is making landfall. But you can see this wide swath, this light pink color, 40 to 60 mile per hour winds extending all the way into the mountains of West Virginia. And then we could even see some hurricane force wind gusts there in the mountains of western North Carolina in those higher elevations. So again, you can see by this swath of wind that those impacts are going to be extending very, very far north, away from where the center of circulation does indeed make landfall. Then I want to go into the tornado risk as well. Tornadoes can occur on the eastern side of the tropical system. That is typically where we see them. So if we draw in the projected track generally like that, everywhere to the east of that track is where we're going to see that tornado risk down Thursday here and then up into the Carolinas for Friday. These tropical tornadoes can be very dangerous. They can move pretty quickly, and they can develop pretty quickly too, and you really can't see them. They're not like the tornadoes that we see out in the plains that you can visually see. These could be rain wrapped and very difficult to see. So we want people to have a way to receive warnings on their phone or devices so that they can be aware if a tornado is coming to their area. And then one more real big hazard if I can go over one more hazard, is going to be the storm surge aspect. This is where I am very concerned about some big time storm surge coming into the Big Bend area of Florida. So again, if we draw our track on here, generally like that, on the eastern side of that track, we're really going to be piling up the water into all of these bays in here. And so this area here, just east of the landfall point, we're concerned about a 15 to 20 foot storm surge in that area. And then we can even see some storm surge on the East Coast as well, as we're still going to have that flow coming in. So we're concerned Charleston to Savannah, down to Daytona Beach. We could even see some flooding in those areas as well.
So just to summarize, we have strong storm surges on the west and the east coast of Florida, but that is stretching up into Georgia and South Carolina. You mentioned you're very concerned about high rainfall in western North Carolina, potential mudslides, and extremely high winds there. Which of these states are under a state of emergency right now? And also, what part of this week will see the worst of the storm effects? It hasn't happened yet. Will it hit? Is it Thursday? Is it Friday? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, well, certainly I know the state of Florida is under a state of emergency, and there is mandatory evacuations in a lot of these counties right here close to where the landfall point is going to be. So we certainly encourage, if you're told to do so by your government officials to evacuate out of these coastal areas, please do so, because again, this storm surge, 10 to 15 and then 15 to 20 feet right near where the center is going to be making landfall, that can be extremely devastating. Just picture yourself standing at the beach, your feet are in the water, and then picture, 15 to 20 feet above the water, and then just straight inland. That's the kind of flooding that we could be dealing with in the Big Bend area as this storm makes landfall. In terms of when we would expect to see some of the impacts, well, we're already starting to see some of the rain associated with that trough that I talked about. You can see we have already some clouds here across the panhandle of Florida, and there's actually been some flash flood reports in this area here, and then even up into northwestern Georgia. Again, it's not directly related to Helene, but it is related to that dip in the jet stream that's going to be kind of steering Helene to the north and allowing that rain and wind to really be transported to the north. One of the good things we do on our graphics is we put the timelines on to kind of show people when we think those impacts are going to start arriving. Again, we're already starting to see some impacts from the rain, again, not directly related to Helene, but nevertheless, we're already starting to see flooding. So in terms of when we would expect the Helene rainfall to begin across a lot of these areas of panhandle of Florida, the Helene rainfall should get there, later on today and into the overnight hours. And then during the day tomorrow, that's where it starts to creep up a little bit further north in the peninsula. And then Wednesday night, it really starts to surge northward into the southeast. Again, they're already dealing with some rain right now, but that's kind of like the precursor to Helene. In terms of wind, the wind is more closely correlated to where the storm center is going to be. It's not really going to be stretched out as much as the rain is, but you can see here's our 8 p.m. Wednesday Eastern Time timeline, starting to get those winds into South Florida, and then during the overnight hours on Wednesday, that's really where those high winds are going to be moving into the portions of the southeast as the storm begins to actually pick up speed as it moves into the southeast.
I see. Those projections are likely why the Tampa International Airport has already said it will be shutting down commercial and cargo operations at 2 a.m. Thursday, so basically overnight Wednesday. So, Alex, that kind of aligns with everything intensifying as time goes on. What is your forecast for when this storm will peter out? I imagine as it stays over land, it will eventually slow down, but how long will that take?
Yeah, certainly. So the storm will, like I said, be picking up speed until landfall. And then through Friday, it will be moving at a pretty good clip. But once the storm gets over the Tennessee Valley here, it is going to slow down quite a bit in this area. And so that is where it's really going to squeeze out a lot of moisture across the Tennessee Valley here. And so we are very concerned about those big rainfall rates, big rainfall totals up in this area here. Again, it's due to the storm, slowing down once it gets into these areas. And we're also going to be dealing with some upslope flow. So the winds around the storm, right, go like this. And so it's those winds are essentially going to be hitting into those mountains there, the southern Appalachians, and being forced upwards and the precipitation is going to be squeezed out kind of like a sponge in a lot of those areas. And so that's why we're concerned. If I bring up our flash flood risk map here, again, these are the areas we are most concerned with for the flash flood risk. We have a small area here in the Ozarks of Arkansas, but the biggest risk we think is going to be near where the storm makes landfall, and then up in the southern Appalachians for some potentially significant, potentially even catastrophic flooding.
Catastrophic flooding below the Appalachians. Do the Appalachians kind of serve as a barrier? And if you're above the Appalachians in parts of Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, will we not see the effects of this storm as greatly?
Well, the Appalachian Mountains extend all the way basically from down here in southern Georgia, even all the way well up into Pennsylvania and into the Northeast. You know, that entire mountain chain is known as the Appalachians. But generally speaking here, I think the wind will probably get about as far north as potentially even West Virginia here. There's a big area of high pressure to the north across the Northeast, and so that should help to prevent a lot of this flooding and heavy winds essentially from getting into the northeastern United States. It's essentially going to hit kind of like a wall, I think, around this area up here. But everywhere to the south of that will be under the gun there for heavy rain and destructive winds potentially.
Helene is currently a Category 1 hurricane. It could go up to a Category 3 hurricane. Just remind everyone, Alex, what is the difference between Category 1 and Category 3? Is it the rainfall that makes a storm rise in category? Is it the wind speed, or all of the above?
It's the wind speed, at least on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale, which measures the wind speed. It's only based on wind speed, and that's what the National Hurricane Center uses for their designations. And so when we talk about a Category 1 hurricane, that is strictly based on wind speed. And so we're expecting it to become a Category 3 hurricane. Now, the good thing is what AccuWeather does is we have the real impact scale, which measures the storm not only on the wind speed, it measures the storm on the rainfall potential, the storm surge, the economic damage. All these different factors are also being measured for the real impact scale. And so we are actually here at AccuWeather, we're actually giving this storm a real impact of a 4. So even above what the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale for wind is giving it. And again, that is mainly because we are concerned about the flooding rainfall, potentially catastrophic rainfall here in the mountains of western North and South Carolina, as well as near, where the storm obviously makes landfall. But the storm is going to be very, very large in size. And so we're very concerned about that storm surge I mentioned earlier, across the entirety of Florida, as well as even along the southeast coast, we're going to be seeing a lot of this storm surge. So that is the reason why we went with a 4 for the real impact scale, because we think it's not only about the wind, it's about the flooding from storm surge, from rainfall, and the fact that it extends so far to the north.
Is this the worst hurricane we've had so far this hurricane season?
I think it could be. We did see Beryl and Debbie. Both of those were hurricanes, but I do think that this storm probably will surpass them in terms of damage and strength as well. We're anticipating this to become a major hurricane sometime during the day tomorrow, and landfall as such. And so that is why we're concerned that this could be, at least so far this season, the most damaging, strongest, and most destructive hurricane, potentially by far, especially because of these wide-reaching impacts that we're expecting across the southeastern United States.
And throughout this conversation, you've mentioned a few pieces of advice for folks who live in the affected areas, but let's just summarize. You want notifications turned on the phone. What else should people do to protect themselves if they live in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina?
Yeah, again, we want people to listen to their local emergency managers. They know the area the best. They know what areas flood. They know the vulnerable spots. And so if they're telling you to evacuate, you really need to do so. Again, we are concerned in this entire Big Bend area, 10 plus feet of storm surge. You just cannot survive this type of storm surge if you're right at the beach. The rescuers will not be able to come get you in the middle of a storm if you decide to ignore those mandatory evacuation orders that have been given in a lot of these areas. You will be on your own in the middle of the storm. Until the storm leaves, nobody will be able to come and rescue you. So it is very important that you at least get away from the immediate coastline. You don't necessarily have to go too far inland. You just want to get away from the immediate coastline where that storm surge can threaten your area.
Alex De Silva, lead hurricane expert for AccuWeather. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and these maps with us. We so appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.